I'm here with Inspector Lincoln Sycamore, who is the police's Hawke's Bay area commander. Kia ora, Inspector, and thanks for joining me.
Kia ora, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Just generally, to start off, how are things going with policing in the region? Just generally in terms of crime levels, in terms of resourcing, how are you placed in Hawke's Bay at the moment?
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, it's probably important to acknowledge that a year ago we were still working through the recovery from Cyclone Gabriel, and those types of events, and the recent rain event we've had in Wairoa, for example, and the other sort of natural disaster stuff that we've worked through with our community has probably been front of mind for a lot of people. And of course, what sits alongside that is the normal, what we call anyway, the normal operations and things that we're asked to respond to. In general terms, the numbers that we're seeing are quite steady. And in fact, look, that's not to minimise the impact that people in our community, the impact that they experience from crimes that they themselves are subject to, because burglary in particular is one of those really invasive crimes that makes people feel particularly unsafe. What I can say around that, though, is that those levels have reduced over the years, and we're not seeing big spikes in it. What we do see, though, is definite spikes in car crime, and that is whether that's people interfering with vehicles or stealing them, or whatever the case may be. And whilst those, they relate to vehicles, often they're recorded as burglaries because people are entering into yards to steal cars. And the main perpetrators that we experience that are involved in car crime are young people. And like the rest of the country has seen, that impact and incidence of that type of crime is quite significant. And really, it's a very small number of young people that offend or commit offences of this manner, but they could be, can be quite prolific. And that's certainly been our experience. And what we see is that people as young as 13 years old and sometimes younger that are not necessarily the perpetrators of, but certainly involved in the periphery, and that could be, getting into a car that's been stolen or learning the trade, so to speak, of how to steal a car. And those types of crimes present real challenges because it has a massive impact on the individuals that lose a vehicle, and often the vehicle's recovered damaged to various extents. But then the young people themselves is the system, and how the system supports those young people is the next sort of challenge. What I can say about that, though, is that police obviously have a very close relationship with Oranga Tamariki and their support. And so what OT has done over the years is invested in the wraparound support for young people. It's not a perfect system, but what we have seen is, in some cases, a reduction of the young person's offending because of the support that they've been able to have wrapped around them.
A lot of these crimes by young people, and in general, opportunistic crimes?
Yeah, yes, they are. Certainly the young people, and what we know from talking with some of the perpetrators is that it can be the thrill of it for them. And what we saw when there was quite a significant, and this is not Hawke's Bay necessarily, but around the country with the burglaries of vape stores and the ram raiding, is that people were recording what they were doing for the infamy, so to speak, of it, and posting it on social networks and sharing it with each other on secure sharing platforms. And that notoriety was certainly a driver for some people.
Would that make it easier for you to catch them if it's on the internet?
Oh, look, it wasn't always posted on things that we could access, but certainly, we're interested in any sort of technology that can assist us with follow up, whether that's prosecution or some sort of alternate action.
Yeah, and I know you can't sort of pigeonhole who the people are, but are these kids are they just roaming around at night, and what sort of parental control and that do they have? And is it, you mentioned it's a small group, are you finding the same offenders over and over involved in things?
In some cases, yes, and certainly that's kind of the main instigators can be recidivists, as
Yeah.
the word suggests. And sometimes it's, a young person that's really never encountered or had an interaction with the police before. So it really is a mixed bag. And but we're really interested in how do we support those young people that are, the serious end of offending. And the government's targets around reducing, and the police target around reducing that number of serious offenders in the youth space is front of mind for us as well. So that will be not just a police matter, it'll be working with OT and other support agencies that can help us with that problem, because it's not something that you can flick a switch and solve it. And whether or not to answer your earlier question, whether or not these young people, what types of homes they come from, it's anything from very supportive home to not. There's no sort of one size fits all for these particular people.
Yeah. And now, obviously, the more dramatic crimes do get the airplay and are in the media and that, and we've had a few ram raids and that. What is your approach to ram raids, and how you sort of educating shop owners and that to sort of make themselves safer to stop these happening?
Yeah, we've had a really low incidence of that type of offending across Hawke's Bay. Certainly not on the scale that other centres have experienced. I guess in general terms, the vigilance around reporting suspicious behaviour, target hardening is a term that you'll hear in the crime prevention space, and that involves obviously work with councils, and the councils have been really supportive, and the police initiative that saw some funding quite a while ago now, with when the discussion of bollards and whatnot came about. But there are simple things that that people can do in general terms, and having really heavy planter boxes, for example, adjacent to entrances and that type of thing can deter that type of offending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
And
the
I
common
guess
thing,
that message. Sorry, Andrew. That
okay,
message of if you do hear or see something and you think, crikey, that doesn't look right, that 111's the number to ring. And if you know something about a crime that's happened, people can report that anonymously on 0800 555 111.
Yeah.
We just need the information. And a lot of people too sort of think, oh, gee, that was in general terms, such a low level offence or something that's happened to me, perhaps. Oh, my light's gone out. What we need people to do is report crime, no matter how small it could be, because what that allows us to do is build a picture of where we need to deploy to. Obviously, we can't be everywhere all at once, but we do our darndest to certainly be in areas that are perhaps being targeted by individuals.
Yeah. Now, the common thing you hear, and I suppose it can be a bit unfair on police, but people say, oh, where are the police? We want people on the streets and that. Is that a focus now of getting sort of boots on the ground and having that visibility so people feel safe?
Yeah, so we, towards October last year, we started a retail crime focused operation, and part of that, and we've continued that, part of that operation was around visibility, certainly focused and particularly focused in our CBDs. So across Eastern District, not only Hawke's Bay, but into Te Tairawhiti as well, where we had a team and still have a team that are dedicated to the higher end shoplifter problem, and also with visibility. So and you will have seen that, look, that's a priority for the government, and of course that's a priority for our commissioner. So how we operationalise that is by having people that are walking the beat, that are interacting with our our retailers, and just being visible. And like I do it, if I have to go uptown and buy lunch, which is pretty rare for me, but I will be in my my body armour and my high visibility vest, and I will walk up the street and I'll talk to people.
Yeah.
And having that interaction and showing that actually police are approachable will mean that we'll get what we need from the public in terms of information and support, because this isn't a police a problem that police can solve on our own. We've got to have that community support.
Are you finding there's a level of anxiety out there? Particularly we had the cyclone and people are still recovering from that, and the latest weather events, and then the whole cost of living, and just everyone's under pressure. Are you finding that there is quite a bit of anxiety out there, and when you go out and about, and people need reassuring?
Well, what I will say to that, mate, is that our role really is about that community support. And with the recent weather event in Wairoa, we were really quick to make sure we got people to the town to support the civil defence, the evacuation side of things. We were quite lucky to get people there, and in the evening we ended up having to ask the Defence Force to fly some staff in because the roads were blocked. So that type of response, you will always see us doing our darndest to be in those types of impacted communities. In general terms, the anxiety level, I suppose anecdotally, yes, people do, I think, feel more under pressure these days, and that can manifest in behaviours that police are called to address, perhaps. Look, in general terms, I think our police service has particularly for Hawke's Bay and Te Tairawhiti, has a really strong relationship with our community, and we really cherish that. And there's a lot of across the various leads of whether that's government and non-government groups. We regularly talk and regularly strategize as to how do we work together to perhaps address some of the social challenges that people are experiencing.
One of the social challenges that we have, particularly in Hawke's Bay, are gangs, and I know there has been a focus on that, and with a lot of tangies and that have been happening. Police, certainly from what we see, you're very proactive in sending out media releases and just keeping the public up to date on what you are doing. Is gang activity increasing in the region?
You will have seen back in May that our commissioner announced the National Gang Unit.
Yes.
Our part in that will be to support the disruption side of the National Gang Unit, and there will be staff dedicated locally to that cause. And look, Eastern District is one of the original homes of a couple of ethnic gangs, and that's a fact. That's a fact within our landscape, right? When there is a tangi, and particularly a gang tangi, we will be visible, and we will do our part in reassuring the public. And you will have seen the recent one in Central Hawke's Bay. There were a lot of police staff dedicated to that, and we were visible, and that was positively commented on by members of the public, both anecdotally to cops on the ground and also through various media channels. And that is our focus, that people do have a right to feel safe, and we'll do our best to make sure that people are safe. And, the Commissioner's vision and our executive vision about New Zealand being the safest country, that all fits into that vision. So, but we're really proud of how we go about our business, and how we interact with our community. And we've got some really dedicated staff that are focused on reducing the harm, particularly that gangs can cause. really mindful of the fact that the overt presence of gangs can be intimidating for people, and we don't lose sight of that. And in fact, that's a real focus for us. And there's a number of tools at play. You'll know about obviously the new legislation that's coming from the government.
Yeah.
We have to understand what that looks like, and how our commissioner intends us to operationalise it. Those tools, alongside the asset seizure, for example, that particular piece of legislation has been incredibly effective at taking the money away from those that commit unlawful activity, and perhaps with the goal of reducing the attraction that type of lifestyle has. And we've had some significant seizures in the past, and I think, just from memory, I do have a list here. So recently we had a seizure of 5.5 kilos of meth. That's a street value of about $2.2 million worth of, and not to mention the social harm. And that, alongside that, of course, was the ammunition and cash that were recovered. Late last year, over $2 million in assets that were seized from a Hawke's Bay gang captain. Middle of last year, about a couple of kilos of cannabis and ammunition, and about $40,000 worth of cash that were involved. It came from 13 search warrants between here and Te Tairawhiti. And so those types of operations really do have an impact on the gang landscape. And what we need from our public is the information that gives us the tools to get into a house or get into a premise to execute those search warrants and keep people ahead of us. And look, there's all sorts of work going on in the background that our staff are dedicated to, and you will have seen in the paper the result from a trial in Napier with a man who was convicted of serious offending against a young 15-year-old girl. It's a few years ago now, and it takes a bit of time for these matters to come through the court. But that person, serious offender, all sorts of things going on in his life. But what we've managed to do, and credit to the detective sergeant involved, who's worked absolutely tirelessly to bring this man to justice, significant result. And he was involved in firearms and drugs and all of those sorts of things, and to get home on the kidnapping and other really serious charges is incredibly important.
Sometimes you do get criticism, fairly or unfairly, saying that with these gang tangies and that the police are merely waving them through, and people should be harder on them. Is that unfair criticism, would you say?
But what we do is we rely on our officers to exercise their judgment whenever they're having something occur in front of them. I think anybody would agree that if one or two staff are faced with a number of people, no matter whether they're gang or not, you're not necessarily going to wade in and wave the blue shirt around and everybody's going to acquiesce and not stand up to you, sort of thing. So the reality is that our approach of if we can do something, we will, there and then, and where we have to gather evidence and follow up, we will, and we do. And you will have seen from the a couple of years ago now, there was a significant gang tangi in Hawke's Bay, and we followed up with a number of prosecutions and vehicle impoundments and seizures and whatnot, as a result of the really poor driving that people saw. The recent tangi in Central Hawke's Bay, we had Eagle here as support for the operation, and we were able to prosecute a couple of drivers that were just, their driving was absolutely abhorrent and just really dangerous, putting legitimate road users at serious risk of harm. And because we had the use of that air asset, we were able to track them safely, and the vehicle managed to get the vehicle stopped. And this one particular one I'm thinking about, it's wanted. that were what we call staff safety, persons of interest, gang linked and all that sort of carry on, and for firearms offences, and hold them to account.
Yeah.
So where we can, we will, and where we gather evidence, we will, and we'll follow up.
Yeah. Just a few more questions to go. In terms of antisocial behaviour, and I don't know, but I seem to be seen more in the news of police cracking down on people doing burnouts and these illegal sort of street gatherings and that. Are you finding that is a problem in this area?
Yeah, over the years we've had our share of antisocial road user gatherings, and we, as you will have seen in the media, we'll do our darndest to hold people to account. And look, we've put together some really effective operations that have deterred gatherings. Hasn't always been successful, but what we need is information from people. So where you're seeing gatherings, please report it. We will follow up, and we'll do our darndest to hold people to account. I know there's a bit of commentary around regarding toughening of the street racer laws. Whether that comes to pass, we'll see what that looks like. Our approach of gather information, the use of CCTV, the use of other technology, we'll put bring all of those resources to bear where we need to. And at a recent gathering here in Hawke's Bay, again we had the use of Eagle, and I can't overemphasize how wonderful that airframe is in terms of gathering information and real time sort of updates on what's happening.
As an observer over the years, I seem to notice that the Eagle's coming down more than it used to. Why is that resource now more available to you?
I think support from our executive around use of the police equipment in a sense. And what I mean by that is that if we see a need, we will ask, and if the airframe is available, it's got to be for the right reasons. It can't just be any other Saturday kind of thing. But look, our executive are really keen for us to have access to the tools that we need, and that enabling the frontline piece, that is a priority for our commissioner. That's where that sits, and it just relates also to that focus on core policing that our commissioner is asking of us. So where we can deliver those services to our community, that's the priority.
Yeah, and just finally, generally at the sort of lower level on the roads and that, drink driving, using a cell phone and that, do you think people are getting the message, or is it still a problem?
I would like to think so, Andrew. We still issue a significant number of infringements for use of mobile phone, for example. There is still a large proportion of our community that is prosecuted for driving under the influence. It is a problem, and that harm that comes from crashes, that moment of inattention, looking at your phone, or if you've had too much to drink, the seriousness of that just can't be overstated. And our focus is that every person has a right to travel on the road safely and not have to worry about someone who's inattentive or intoxicated or whatever the case may be. And that's why you will see us enforcing those laws, and that high visibility highway patrol work that our road policing crews do is crucial to the preventing those serious crashes and injuries. It's again, everyone has a right to go home, and I have a family, and I'd like to think that my kids can drive and not have to worry about potentially being hit by someone. Look, it's an awful thing, Andrew, and having been a frontline officer for 20 some years, you see the harm and the impact, and the hardest job that I've ever had to do, besides the clean up at crash scenes of people, is telling loved ones that their loved one has passed away. And that's really raw for people, and people see the blue uniform, but actually it really, really hurts us when we have to do it, and it's such an awful thing for those families involved.
Yeah, I can imagine. Inspector Lincoln Sycamore, thank you so much for your time. It's been good chatting to you, and hopefully we can catch up in the future again.
My pleasure, Andrew. Thanks for having me.